Well, welcome to Be Refuge. We're glad to have everyone here again, and we have another special guest from our community joining us today. And Kathy has a special announcement for us as well.
Oh my gosh. So I have to say out loud that I sound funny when I'm talking because I am in the middle of a dental emergency. Some people already know this, but today I got these new Invisaligns to help move my mouth for a huge mouth surgery. And so I can't talk right. Okay. And it's horrible as a person who lives out of talking and my mouth. And it's just been a super traumatic event. It started January of this year. And so today, so I'm just naming it, being honest about it, and rolling with it. I just got to embrace it. And it actually fits with a community that I can do that in. And it also fits with today's topic, which makes me happy that we can talk about this together. And that is centering on what it means to be a trauma-informed community. And Nikki Kennedy is a dear, dear teammate and partner in bringing this framework and practices and ethos to the refuge a good chunk of years now, saying, I'll help, I'm here. And we said, oh my gosh, this is what we need. Because honestly, at the refuge, we have been talking about it and we've done a lot of trauma-informed things, but we didn't have intention. And so Nikki, in her work as a trauma therapist, her work internationally, doing things related to trauma and places of trauma around the world. You can hear more about this in Rwanda and some other places. And then also her work in private practice and then working for mental health partners now is we need more trauma-informed communities that are using this centering principle in all that we do. And the refuge has been dedicated to it because of you, Nikki. And so we are so thankful as we're like laying some tracks about the refuge. This feels like so core to me. And so I'm in the middle of my own traumatic event on not having teeth that don't work and teeth that sound funny. But the truth is our community is filled with trauma of our own stories and reality of trying to do this healing community thing together. And so we're just so glad you're with us, and tell us more about what does that even mean, and then kind of your entrance into the refuge and bringing this and what that's really been like for you to help nurture and cultivate these principles in our community.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. So trauma-informed communities are communities where we acknowledge the trauma that is in the people that attend. It's in the rooms that we inhabit. It's stored in the land on which our buildings are built, and we're practicing our communities. So a trauma-informed community is accepting of that reality and works toward healing those spaces intentionally with one another, naming the traumas, and doing that sort of in that, daily way of it. When we know something more, we'll do better. And so we learn what trauma is, and we understand how it's in our community, and we work together to heal one another and the spaces that we inhabit. And so what was your second question? I got into that.
How you got, like, when you came to the community and you were looking for something in terms of community, and then how kind of like this evolved and what that's been like for you.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I started participating in events at the refuge many years ago. I laugh because I always say it's 7 or 8 years ago. I have no idea how many years it was. So it was that many years ago. And I was in a private practice at that time, which I had had since 2006. And so I was working, but really in charge of my own schedule. And I think maybe just starting to teaching at CU Denver. And I was part of the advocates at that time. I think it was just called Advocates. And now it has Advocates Learning Lab, right? But at the time it was Advocates, and it was such a fun group. I loved it. Anybody who wants to attend and who walks with, lives with participates in people can be a part of advocacy and learning to advocate better for ourselves and each other. And so I joined that community. And one time, I think, Kathy, you asked me to lead something. And I was like, I think we should look at trauma and some definitions. So I remember just sitting on the couch and put together a simple slideshow of what trauma is, some definitions, the different ways that it can show up in a person and in the body, that it can be passed down from generations, that, and just the definitions of all of these different things. And then we also looked at ways to deal with trauma, ways to understand it's there, but then how to live with that. Because a lot of the reason we don't engage with their trauma is because we don't know what to do with it. And because it's too fearful, right? It lives in the subconscious. And so it's too much to just be like, oh yeah, here's all my traumas, but I have no idea what to do with it. And so having that balanced with the practices and the intentions around how we set up healing environments for ourselves and each other. So those two things together, I presented at Advocate, and we had this wonderful discussion. And from there, it kind of took off. Kathy's like, I do remember this. We need you. That's what Kathy said. We need you, and we need this. And so it's taken off from there. Different ways of learning and interacting and treating and talking and learning about trauma and naming it. Yeah.
You remember that, Kathy?
I do.
Is that what you said? I think it's what you said.
Sounds like Kathy.
Yeah.
We need you.
Yes, was I right? Was I right, Jill?
Yeah, totally. We definitely do.
It's so interesting because this is the space that I work in, right? And so when I put it together, I remember thinking, I don't know if this is good or is going to be helpful. And I think it helped me lean into what I know to be true also, and not be fearful of speaking and sharing and teaching and learning, right? That it sort of catapulted me into a movement space as well, to hear that.
Yeah, and one thing I love is that it's kind of over the years like woven into different things and just become part of our vocabulary. And then even advocates every other week do like a trauma informed check-in and like trauma informed practices. And it's kind of like woven into all sorts of different aspects of our community because so many people have trauma.
And it helps us feel included. When we walk into a space, a new space, or a space with people who don't acknowledge or haven't talked maybe very real about maybe past experiences, and we're not talking just laying everything bare, but acknowledging that some things are hard, or we've been through certain things, or we deal with certain things. So when a community or a room is informed, we understand, and even in the way that people feel when they walk in the room, they can feel that they are acceptable and that we are accepted and not neglected. Because when we don't deal with trauma, we neglect people. And it's not a, what's the word? Like it's either or.
Yeah. Like you either are a trauma-informed community or you aren't. Is that
or you're not.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe. I didn't read that anywhere. I believe that to be true. That it is one way or the other, right? And so it's, and some people are ready for that and others are not. I remember one of the first times I started speaking about this, and Joe, you were there, somebody spoke up against what I had to share, like in like a Sunday evening share thing. And that was really hard. And, so you come up against pushback also. And that's trauma speaking about, I'm afraid.
And what do you think about the balance between professional mental health training and lay people being trauma informed and those types of circles? And I think also trauma is, I feel like no one was talking about trauma like 10 years ago, and now like everything is trauma ever. I would love to hear some like nuance around, how do we empower lay people to talk about this and to create spaces that are safe, but then also where's the role of professional mental health people who've been clinically trained to support people in those spaces, and then the continuum of trauma, all the way to, post-traumatic stress disorder to a single event trauma. And yeah, that's kind of a big question, but
that was a lot. So
Yeah.
I'll start, and then you remind me if I miss something or
Okay.
go off on a tangent. Okay.
yeah, I will.
So trauma is defined by the person who has experienced the trauma. Some people will experience a traumatic event like I did. Way back in my 20s, I was struck by lightning and had a whole host of situations happen after that, but basically I nearly died. So I didn't die, and here I am, and experienced a whole host of symptoms that I later learned was post-traumatic stress. And then if post-traumatic stress lasts long enough, diagnostically, you can add disorder at the end. It's just a diagnosis. It doesn't mean some people experience it more than somebody else. It just means that it's, for insurance reasons and treatment protocol, folks know what we're dealing with. And at the time, I learned that there was a small percentage of brains that could assimilate a single event like that, and work it through and not develop post-traumatic stress symptoms. So those would be heightened anxiety, sleeplessness, hallucinations, or dissociations, things that are really out of the ordinary for somebody to experience. Oftentimes somebody might experience that, and then the brain is able to synthesize and move forward and heal. The brain heals, right? Just like any other part of your body. And then for other people, but we don't know why, it sticks there and creates such an intense environment that feels fairly unlivable for the person experiencing those symptoms. And so that's when it gets into a disorder type space. We don't know why some brains go one direction, some brains go another. And it doesn't have anything to do with anything that you could think of, right? You could be the most resourced person to the most under-resourced person and have experiences everywhere on the spectrum. So, and trauma can happen. Trauma are things, sometimes you may have heard it called small t or big T trauma. Those aren't clinical words, but they're really helpful in understanding that some things are really big, like getting struck by lightning, and everyone's like, oh yeah, of course. And then other things are like, I experienced something as a kiddo, or a pet died, or, and anything that was hurtful and painful and hard for a person to deal with. That's a trauma too. So trauma is a big word that encompasses a lot of things. I think most people, at least, like, because I resonate with you, Joe, too. I used to be like, I only talk about this at work with individual clients or with doctors or insurance companies negotiating prices or something. Now it's in the vernacular. And so what are people talking about? I don't always know what people know. But we are getting comfortable with the language, and I used to hear it in terms of trauma, a trauma to the body, like fractured arm is a trauma, right? In the trauma room at the emergency, right? In the emergency department. They'll use that word. And so it's, in this case, a trauma to the brain, just as a trauma to the teeth, Kathy, right? A trauma to the body is a trauma to the body. And so, but what we know more and more, and what we're talking about more and more through, because we have some media and books and some big authors and folks speaking out, is that these traumas, all the traumas from the day we're born or before, all the way to right now, are stored in the body. And the body remembers what happened. So the brain heals, but just like don't forget that you broke an arm, when you were 4, right? You don't forget that you experienced this. And so the brain stores that information and the body stores it. And often we can feel that in the body before we've registered why we might be feeling something this uncomfortable. That pit in your stomach, like pressure in your chest, fear about something when you look around and you realize, I'm safe. Why do I feel this fear? and a host of other symptoms.
Mm.
Well, it makes me think that a big piece of the refuge is that it is a place to be wherever you are. And we do have a lot of people, and this has come up even on the podcast so far, like, I didn't really want to go because I thought it was a church and I wasn't going to do that anymore. I had a traumatic experience, even if it isn't like, some people have deep, deep wounds, spiritual abuse, and really, really hard things. Some people just were not accepted for who they were. And, and that's not a jest. Those are really, really hard. Those are traumatic things. I love the definition of it's the person gets to define versus the system defining what trauma is. And so, like, creating a space to honor that and not push on people and not expect people not to be struggling with being in community that has anything related to faith in it, I think has really helped a lot of us. But it's hard when you have a lot of people bumping up against past things, past hurts, and past traumatic events, trying to live together in community. So I would just love to hear, like, what it's even been like for you, and then what you've observed kind of over the years, like what that's like, I guess. I don't know, it's not that great of a question, but.
Great. What it makes me think of, Kathy and Joe, is that, we are also, systems do cause trauma as well. And so when people see a gathering and they think Refuge is a church, there's an immediate reaction to that. And that's a response to something. And so we have to sit and listen to that for a moment and wonder, what is that response? Where is it from? Why is it coming up? What is it trying to protect me from? And so in a world that has, very much not followed the ways of Jesus or other great spiritual leaders, in terms of things like nonviolence and equity. And, we promote those that have and those that have not. That's the system we live in, right? And it's focused on those that have and keep getting more. So existing in that as a person, it creates a level of trauma, because as a human being, we are coming up against a system that says we're not equal. So whatever that is, that says, so our stories come in with that, right? So for me, I will speak from my point of view, someone who grew up in conservative evangelicalism. When I encounter a church, I immediately come up against white supremacy, exclusion, misogyny, patriarchy. Are those my tops? I think those are the top ones for me. Is that enough? And so that's what I think of. And I have to sift through all of those to enter into a space that had none of that intentionally bringing, but it's because of my history that I come in with. And so I think that's what people have to come up against, and they have to override that to join a community that is focused on healing and transformative practices and equity and justice, and not promoting those systems that hurt people and have people on top and on the bottom. So I encounter something that's been important to me too, is that there's this open 12-step group to be a part of. Normalizing addiction, normalizing that everybody struggles with addictions in this world, that sets a tone of nonviolence in our community and allows somebody to take a step in. Be like, oh, this is cool. We talk about it. We advertise it. Oh, anyone could show up. Oh, I could be included. I remember one of the things I worked on early was getting Reagan Bird to come and speak about toxic masculinity, and being able to walk into a place that would talk about that, host somebody, and speak honestly is a move toward nonviolence, right? Of upending a system. no, we're not intending to pursue that kind of culture here. And we're going to learn about it, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to keep interacting with it so that we don't intentionally create more pathways of hurt for people and more trauma. So those are the things that come to mind that were important for me as I entered a space where I could deal with spirituality, could talk about things of faith, that other spiritual traditions, anything we could talk about, that we could use Buddhist 12 steps possibly in groups that we can learn and have learning parties from the Muslim community, from, it's those things are things that tell me the environment is safe.
Mhm.
And that let me come closer and closer. So that's what drew me in. And what keeps me is the pursuit of those things that we keep talking, we keep pursuing, we can, I know it's always really hard, but a place where you can rupture and repair has to be there. We have to be able to repair after rupture. We also have to be able to acknowledge that we've caused rupture and pursue healing ourselves. And that I see playing out. Are we perfect? No, but I have seen it and experienced it myself. And that's some real base level groundwork for knowing that this space is informed on trauma and all the ways that trauma can be inflicted and perpetuated, I guess.
Yeah. I appreciate how nuanced it is. There's this holding of so many things, right? You're holding the community being a safe place, but then your own autonomy and your choice to, if something's triggering, to leave a space. There's also your own ownership in things as well. And some people are not able to do that in different ways. And then the ownership of a community to not inflict more trauma and to keep learning and to keep growing, and then also, rupture and repair. I love that. And then there's also times where you have to walk away. And so just recognizing this isn't clean. It's not here's your simple 3 steps to being a safe, trauma-informed community. It'd be nice. But that it's dynamic. It's dynamic, That would be nice. I want to write that book.
That would be nice.
It totally fits with what everybody wants, though. I mean, this is a piece of it. Everyone wants is, tell me these 3 things. And, I was thinking, I'm really glad you mentioned the 12-step group and the advocates group, because this first season of Be a Refuge, we probably won't get to those. We have a limited amount of time before we take a break for the summer. And so I'm glad you talked to them, because we want to flesh those out, but they kind of fit so well in this conversation. Also, it's just to know we're always practicing. And years ago on Advocates Learning Lab, everyone was always open to self-care and practices that would help us last. But we always had the first Tuesday was the topic, whatever the topic was. And the group came up with the wisdom. We need a place not to just do the topic. We need a third Tuesday to actually process it and see what we needed and to engage. So it emerged from the group without even the language. But since you started building that in, these practices are helping us, because they're mind body, deepening, what we can do in our body to regulate and to settle. And so I would just love just a couple, I think you came to Stephen a couple weeks ago, or no, it wasn't a couple weeks ago now, time is weird, it was in the fall, and you just set us up for a couple meetings and just gave us a couple practices. They're so simple, but they work. Could you just for everyone listening, what are a couple things this helps regulate when you're sitting there and something happens, or you walk in, or you're just moving in the world this way? These are some things that really could help us, and they're simple and anyone can do them.
Oh, for sure. So I think what you're referring to is that we feel our trauma or others' trauma when I'm in a room and with a community. So the irony is we need community to heal, and community can cause a disruption and uncomfortability. I think that's ironic. So I have to learn how to integrate those two things. And that's a process, a lifelong of learning about myself and my story and learning about someone else and their story and not centering myself in someone else's story. That everybody has the voice, right, to share from their perspective. And so when I get dysregulated in a room, right, there are many things that we can do to address what's coming up. We don't have to tamp down and get embarrassed or run away. We can do those things, but we don't have to. And one of the more recent ones that I've been working with a lot is to interact some with the vagus nerve. And you do that a little by touching your body, like your hand to your heart, and connecting with yourself and asking a question, what do I need right now? And allowing that, plus some breath work, which breathe in for a count of 3 or 4, breathe out for a count of 3 or 4. Intentional breathing, slowing the breath down, lowers the heart rate. The body's physiology changes so that you can show up in the room and make a decision you'd like to make in that moment. So you're actually interacting with the body where the trauma is stored, right? We're not ignoring the body. We're not dismissing it. We're saying, thank you for telling me. Now, what do I need? And allowing yourself, ourselves, to know what that is before reaching out and seeing what anyone else needs in the room. Many of us, I will speak from my perspective, being female in America means I grew up in an environment where I was to be a helper, to be aware of what everyone else in the room needs. And my nervous system, and I say all the time, is set for that. I have to override that system to go backward and say me first so that I know how to show up in the room for someone else and onward. So that's one really important practice that I do. And another one that comes to mind is the idea that we need to complete a stress cycle. So if a symptom of stress kind of comes up in the body, so I start to get panicky a little bit, or I start to, shortness of breath, or I get really nervous, or my fears are coming up. What I can do is say thank you to my body for letting me know how I feel. And then also acknowledge that now that that's happened, I need to allow the body to complete a stress cycle so I can show back up in the room. It's not ignore what's happening, flee, run away necessarily, right? After I've determined that I am safe in the room. Then it's about, okay, how do I like to bring my body's response back down into homeostasis? So these can be whoever you are. And often I think in our culture, maybe some of the things we forget to try are embodied practices like dancing and singing and playing with the body that allows the body to return back into a space you'd like it to be. But it can also be things like daydream for a little bit of time. Think about something that makes you happy. It could be a peaceful guided relaxation. It could be reach out and connect to somebody you trust. Even just sitting down next to somebody can help regulate the body with that shared energy in the room. Because just as you can feel and pick up on other people's energy that activates us, so can we pick up on the calming energy in the room.
That's so good. Yeah, I think that somatic bodily thing is so important. And, I have some trauma from my time in India and was diagnosed with PTSD in 2010. And I wrestled for a while with what that meant. I didn't really understand what it meant. And I think I was trying to work my way out of it with my mind for a long time, where I was just especially with PTSD, sometimes things don't make sense. It's I get triggered by something completely innocuous and then I'm out for a week. And so I would be what is wrong with, and just come on, brain. But then realizing and really understanding it was my body was what was struggling and that was stuck, and finding ways to reassure my body. And I think that's counterintuitive to a lot of things in our culture where it's yeah, just process it, talk it through, or just shove it down, or, whereas sometimes the way through is openness, acknowledgement, honoring what our bodies are saying and not trying to talk ourselves out of anything, but just saying like, this is hard. This
And
sucks.
there's choice in it. Like that is so important for
Mm.
equity and justice, is there is a choice I have and I can make now.
Mm.
And it is not going to be what maybe someone else says or prescribes. I might do that, but I get to choose how I'm going to regulate.
Mm.
Mhm.
I love this. The other day at the cafe, someone needed to leave in the moment and stopped and said, "Hey, I just need you to know I was experiencing this and it's not good for me right now. And I just need to remove myself from the situation and then I'll try again, but not for today. I just didn't want you to think I was just like storming out or whatever. This is what's happening." And I'm just like, thank you. I mean, this is so freaking healthy. And it's so healthy, and to really honor that in each other. And I did ask, like, is there anything that we could do to support that, you know? And it was like, no, this is what I know I need to do. And then like, let it go. And in our fixie, we want to like make it all better in the moment and resolve all the issues. And it's like, no, that is like to be celebrated. But it can feel in a community sometimes disruptive. In when people are looking for ease, they're kind of looking for a homogenous group that like feels like you, because when people are really healing and taking care of themselves, then they draw good boundaries and they get up and leave, or they do something while people are talking or other things. And I love it. But I know that for some people looking for something that's a little more clean, they don't get that.
Yeah, that is true.
I think it might clean. Yeah, I think health is also repelling to some people. Is that the right word? It's for some who do not want to go there in themselves, or have most likely had that pushed on them that they can't have responses, right? So it can also be an interesting, tough space too, is that people get like repelled by health because it looks weird or uncomfortable because it isn't what they expected. I think that that's true.
Yeah.
I watched that happen.
I think I told Kathy this the other day, but someone I know was in a cult and they left the cult. And so they were moving, and they were telling me that they couldn't find anybody to help them move. And they're like, man, I miss being in the cult because everybody had to help me move. Like it was required. And now I can't find anybody to help me move. But I think sometimes we like those more structured, more stable, more controlled systems because they feel like safer in a way, like in the sense of like, I know what to expect. I can, and I don't have to like create things for myself. I can just like lean into this whole system. Whereas like growing in freedom and autonomy sometimes is scarier because there's more ambiguity. And even though healing doesn't look necessarily as clean, but there is more freedom. So
yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I can relate to that. And it is also true that what my guess, that person knew the order of things and they could count on things. And that is also true for a healthy individual. And I'll point out, when there is so much order and routine and structure to Refuge, it's just a little bit different than you might expect it to, right? Like a thing of all the times, and this has been important to me that I've just realized really just somewhat recently, every time each event each year comes up, every second first Tuesday are this, and every third and fourth Tuesday is this, every summer there's this, right? Like there's a lot of routine and structure in that is really helpful for people. And that's just in the setup of the environment. We have to realize that it's there, that it isn't like a free-for-all going on. Not at all, as I well know. But I think when people arrive, they're expecting it to routines and rituals and environment to look a certain way. So then, right? Yeah.
Well, time for our rapid fire questions. Unless Kathy, do you have a last closing question, or Nikki, any closing nuggets.
We need you. That's
Yes.
all I'm gonna
There we
say.
go.
We need you, and we need to.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a fleeting thought or a like okay, and then it's the next thing. Like this is core and central, and we're gonna keep at it. And so, thank you. That's what I want to say. Thank you for what you've helped us so much, and you're going to keep on helping us, and we're going to keep healing together and becoming healthier as individuals, and then as a system as well.
Mm.
You're welcome. I need you too.
All right, friend. What's one word that best describes the refuge to you?
Eclectic.
I like it.
Me too. Okay. I keep connecting with the Refuge community because
I am loved there.
You are.
yeah.
The most irritating part of the refuge is, or one of the most
Just be
irritating.
honest.
Oh. As much as I welcome it, and I just welcome it and grit my teeth, is when people talk and move around and interrupt when other people are talking.
It's fair.
It is. It's at both ends. They're taking care of
Feel
themselves.
that all
it's
in my
irritating.
body.
Yeah.
Okay, so being part of the refuge has helped me
Stay honest and true to myself.
Mm, it's a good-
love it.
So as our close, we're leaving today with a little bit more or a little bit less.
I have two:
Okay.
joy and connection.
Love it. I'm leaving with a little more I feel like I always say it, but gratitude, but also like being compelled. Like I'm just like that energy to keep on this course and to not be distracted.
And I'm leaving with I feel like more expansion, I don't know, spaciousness in multiple ways, in my mind because I learn new things, and in my heart because I love y'all and I love what we're doing. So that's it.
I love you too.
So fun to get to play, and I'm really excited for a lot of things ahead. And we're just in this 2020, we have some more things to just keep folding in, and so it's going to be fun and super grateful.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, friends.